Hello and welcome to my talk about FBSnapshotTestCase in Munich, while I am in Hamburg, one day early. So, what is who developed the app before? Okay, it's a bit weird. And who will test for it? Also a bit weird, but I see hands raising, so that's okay. But why didn't you? Why didn't you road test? Maybe it's because you want to get your killer app idea on Kickstarter as soon as possible. That's a legit reason. Or winners don't test. It's also okay to believe, although it's wrong. And maybe it's because most of your code is view code and it's really hard to test. That might be a common issue, and I also had this misconception before. So, what do I mean with that? We're gonna develop an app today together, like I did most of the part already, but it's basically called Nutrition Yo, because the health business is very, very important nowadays and you get a lot of funding with it. So here's our app. There are a lot of beverages indicated by the emojis, and there are also two labels indicating how much you drank today and also the amount of things and what you already drank. There's a little stepper, you can tap on it and decrease and increase the amounts of things you drank today. So I did that already. And what we have is a simple UI table view controller setup. You should all be familiar with it. If not, you're gonna learn it in like next week, I think. We also have a beverage model, which represents a beverage, and we have a beverage cell, which displays the beverage model in the UI table view controller. Fairly similar. I think most of you have done it already. So what do we want to do? We want to test our cell interactions. We also want to see if the texts we set on the labels are correctly displayed. We also want to interact with the stepper, increase and decrease, and see if the labels are correctly set. And we also want to test our view layout code. So I wrote the model test for you already. It's simple function. You have a subject that's beverage beer. We test the amount is 0.5, that's liters. They also have a description, which is beer in brackets 0.5 liters. And we also have a nice emoji because I'm not very well at Photoshop, so I didn't do any images. That's the model logic test. We take a subject, which is in this case tea, so we not only test beer. We set the units drunk to 0. We assert that the units drunks are correctly returned at 0. Then we set it to 5. So in our case, you would have to tap the stepper 5 times, and then we see if the units drunk are correctly returned. So. And then we take another instance to see if it's actually persisted. In this case, it's persisted in NS user defaults and it's correctly returned 5. We also have the cell view test, which tests the cell configuration. So we have a configure method on the cell, which takes a beverage. So we take the beverage, which in this case is again beer, because I think it's the most common drink today, because I have one here and you should too. So we set the units drunk to 3, and then we take our cell, initialize it like any table view would do when dequeuing, also setting the model. Then we assert that the beverage emoji label, which represents the emoji in the front, is equal to the beer emoji. We also test that our beverage name label is equal to our beverage text, and also the amount drunk label is 3 drunk today. And we see if the stepper value is correctly set, because if it's not, then the value would be set incorrectly. We also have cell logic tests, of course. Same procedure, like we take our model, we set the units drunk to 0, we take a cell and configure it, then we set the stepper value to 5 and call the method which would be called by the UI value change notification of the stepper. which is in this case stepper stepped. And then we give this method the stepper, which would be come from the notification, and then we assert that the label is correctly set, so it's updated immediately. Not that we first have to scroll and see if the labels are repopulated, but it should increase immediately. So that's an important thing here. All tests green, and we're very good to go, I think. But I'm not very sure if the code I wrote is really good or if my unit tests are really shitty. So, because the actual app looks like this, but all our tests passed, so where's the error? Thing is, we have to write snapshot tests, because else we don't know for sure. Sure, we could check if the frames are set correctly, and if they are not 0, like in this case they would be 0 altogether. But we don't want to do that because it's very error prone and no one knows what a frame of 0, 0, 200, 500 looks like. You can install it with Carthage, which is new and which we will use. You can also install it with CocoaPods, and it's called FBSnapshotTestCase. With Carthage it's GitHub and then Facebook/IO-snapshot-test-case and then equals 2.0, because that's the version where Swift support got introduced. So we're going to do just that, and I'll walk you through the Carthage installation. The usage is import FBSnapshotTestCase in your Swift file, then inherit from FBSnapshotTestCase in your test class. In the setup method, set the record mode to true. That runs the test and also then saves a snapshot to the disk, which is then compared when you run the test the next time. So there's an actual diff run between the saved file in your project and the one the simulator displayed. And if they match, the test is true. If not, an error is thrown. Then you run the unit test and then you remove the setup again, because you don't want to record every time, because just when you change something in the views. So, quick demo of that. Gonna go in Xcode. I hope you can see it because I can't really check your response, so I'm gonna assume it's okay for you. Our app delegate looks very similar to any Xcode default. We have a view controller which we set up. This is the view controller. Also have here our beverages, which is an array of beverages, and we have all different beverages in there. Then we initialize it, register the cell, return our beverages count in number of rows and section, dequeue our cell in self-row at index path, set the beverage and call our already tested configure method. And this is just some Swift rubbish. Our beverage model is also fairly similar. It's an enum. It inherits from it's a string enum, and it's also printable. So we have the description method. Each case has a string, which is not needed anymore in Swift 2.0, but this is Swift 1.2, so we still have to do it. Also the description, which returns the raw value, which is in this case smoothie or beer, and then the amount. The amount is set for each type and returns the amount in liters. The units drunk, it's stored in user defaults because it's the simplest example I can give here. That's also derived from in this user defaults. Then for each case there's an emoji, which you already saw multiple times, so fairly similar, nothing new, nothing fancy, really just a simple example. This is our cell. We have the labels, which are lazy loaded variables, because it's the nicest way. We also have a stepper. We add them all as a subview in init, and have our configure method, which we already tested and used before. So there we set the text of the labels derived from the model, and also the value to the stepper. And then we call our update amount drunk label, which is a method and resets the text from the model. And here's our wonderful layout subviews method, which is quite big intentionally because I want to see that's like it's really a lot of code you have in your layout subviews. The other ones you can really see, okay, this does that, and this sets the text, and this derives from the model. But layout code is really, even when it's auto layout in the visual format language, it's not very easy to get. So either if you're using storyboards, then you see it, but it could also change at runtime. You can write the frame-based layout, which I call it here, or you can also write visual format language in auto layout, but it won't change the fact that your view code is a lot of code. Even if it's XML, you can't really test it. And that's where FBSnapshotTestCase comes in. Here are our normal tests, which is beverages test. They test each beverage and then see if the values are set correctly. So that's very similar. You saw it before in the presentation. Here we have our cell tests, which already inherit from FBSnapshotTestCase. But I want to get you into the installation before, so I removed everything. And there is no card file here. I will increase the font a bit, sorry for that. So I'm gonna see card file, GitHub, and then Facebook. So this is very similar. Cartridge is always GitHub. If it's derived from GitHub, the source, it's also the organization name and then the repository name. So if you want to check it out later, there's a link, and you can also go to Facebook's GitHub page. Then we write it, and then we run cartridge update. This will fetch it and also build it. So we have a FBSnapshotTestCase framework then. So that succeeded as expected. And we can now go into our project and into our test target in build phases. You have to link FBSnapshotTestCase framework with in the build phase link binary with libraries. You can do it by clicking the plus button, add other, then go to your cartridge, build, iOS, framework. There you go. Then you add it there. And that's it. And you also have to add a copy files build phase with the destination frameworks, so it actually gets copied when the tests are installed. This is crucial because if you haven't had that, then the test will fail and you get a weird exception. So be sure to not miss that. In your cell test, you can then import it before it was XC test, just like that. So just import it here, and then you can inherit your class from FBSnapshotTestCase before it was XC test case. This is our test cell configuration method, which is a simple test you saw already before, but it didn't test the layout code. So what we're going to do here is very, very simple. We say FBSnapshot verify view. Then we have the view, which is our cell, so we hang in subject, and you don't need to worry about the identifier or the suffixes because they are defaults. So FBSnapshotTestCase takes advantage of Swift defaults, so you can delete it, and that's it. All we need to do now is we have to write our setup method because we don't have a snapshot yet. And we set the record mode to true. There's also one important part which I just missed. In your scheme, you have to set where the snapshots can be found. So in edit scheme, go to tests and set your environment variables, which I didn't do. So there you go. In my directory structure, you can see it, I open it here, it's a bit easier. With the beverages project, we also have the beverages test, and here's my reference images. So I would have to set beverages test, then reference images. I'm going to do that. FBSnapshot. No, I forgot it. You can also read everything in the README. So FB reference image here, and then you can also actually copy the default value from Facebook. Okay, that was it. Then we can delete our previous recorded images, run the test, and they should actually fail. Which it did. But in the console you can see that the reference images was saved. So you can actually copy the path and open it in preview, for example, and then you see that this image is saved. And I also have a source file change, so this file was added. And I will check it in, because then your CI server can pick it up and compare it to the actual snapshot of the device. So now we gonna remove the record mode here, because we don't want to record a new one every time. And then gonna rerun the tests, and they will succeed without the message in the console. That's about it. But now I want to tell you what if the test fails. So I have here, for example, I can remove some padding here, so it is 20 pixels less. I will rerun the test, not rerun the application, but rerun the test, because you can really test drive your cell layout code with this method. So I see it here, and also the test failed, which is this big error I see here. And if you have Kaleidoscope installed, which I recommend you can run ksdiff, which is their diff command line tool. You can run it, and then in Kaleidoscope you see the difference in the, see here, right? That the beer emoji is off, and that's the 20 pixels we removed, or 20 points. But we can also see it in a very handy Xcode plugin, which is developed by Auta. They can see it, that you can also have this slider in here, and you can also swap the image, or open it in preview, open it in Finder, or diff it with Kaleidoscope. So that's very handy. If you have a lot of failures, you can go through them one by one and see, okay, that's a new one, I swap it, I swap it, I swap it, or I really have to figure out why my tests are failing. This really helps you. And that was already it. Go back to my presentation. That was the demo. So here's this cool plugin I showed you earlier. It's open source. I will put a link in the description, and also it's shown on the last slide. And there you also see when there are lots of failures, you can scroll through them. Helpful links. The GitHub repository is Facebook/FBSnapshotTestCase. The demo project is under my GitHub repository /PeteBrauer/beverages. And there's also this handy Xcode plugin, which I really recommend you to install, which is Auta/snapshots. Yep, that's about it. You can find me on Twitter @PeteBrauer, and also on my blog nerdexponential.com/blog. Thank you, and I hope to see you someday.